Why do you do what you do? What makes us go to school or work? Why do we shake hands or make out? What causes us to play video games, have fights, or have sex? Well, if you were to believe previous psychological investigations into the subject, there would be a whole bunch of reasons, as it was once thought that human emotions could be boiled down to 6, 7, 8, or as many as 30 individual categories, depending on how pretty you want your diagram to be. But in 2014, researchers at Glasgow University found that by studying human expressions, they could categorize every human response and behavioral cause into just 4 distinct emotions. There are just 4 emotive responses which underpin every single thing you do. So, let's find out what they are and how they shape your life in our video on the 4 emotions that control everything you do. At number 4, fear. Fear can make you hide. It can make you lash out. It can make you freeze on the spot or sprint off in the opposite direction. People can become scared of wide open and closed off spaces, and they will practically soil themselves at the sight of anything from spiders and clowns through to belly buttons and the Pope. So, how does this mysterious emotion work? And why are its effects so varied? Fear basically helps you stay alive, keeping you away from threats or things that you don't yet understand. But exactly what these are can differ between people, as fear is both instinctive and taught. We work because we're scared, because of the fear of losing our job and ability to feed ourselves. We lie out of fear that our true motivations will be uncovered, but not everyone is scared of the same things. While we're all frightened of getting mauled by a bear or being found in your mother's underwear, there are some things which people can be made to be fearful of through manipulation or cultural experience. Thanks to our intelligence, humans are the most fearful creatures around. We have the ability to imagine far more harmful things than we will ever encounter in our lifetimes. And this ability only adds more fears onto those created by our actual experiences. You may fear tall, dark-haired men because your creepy uncle looked that way. You might be afraid of bats because you fell into a well as a child on the grounds of your mansion. And you may only be scared of certain social groups because of your society's ideas about their behavior. And worryingly, these fears can also spread far beyond you, as not only is fear contagious when you're with a group of people, but it can also be passed down genetically. But what happens when you're scared? Well, when confronted with your fear, your brain's amygdala region becomes activated by stress, overriding your temporal lobes and removing the possibility of rational thought. A rush of brain chemicals and hormones are then pumped out to increase your heart rate and breathing, preparing you for freeze, flee, or fight. Freezing in place is thought to be related to our ancestral position as prey to some animals, whereby remaining still was advantageous as it stopped us getting eaten. Fleeing has the obvious benefit of moving you away from the source of your fear, and fighting comes into the equation when whatever you fear feels like a contest between life and death. And at that point, say hello to anger. 3. Anger. Anger is what we feel when something is not as it should be. When a person or object interrupts our day to make us feel emotionally or physically threatened. Someone cuts you off in the parking lot. A friend might reply to a text with less than the usual number of kisses. Your brain takes less than a second to decide whether or not to be angry about it. First, it's the adrenaline produced in these situations that gear you up to survive a physical fight. Then your brain's emotional center, the amygdala, wants something to happen. It doesn't know what it wants to happen, but like a dive bar drunk, it sure as heck knows something's gonna go down. Thankfully, at the same time, your frontal lobe balances all this out and acts as peacemaker, as its ability to reason stops you from going full-on Hulk rage. Altogether, this entire process takes less than 2 seconds, and that's why counting to 10 in an angry situation is sound scientific advice. Interestingly, women tend to get most angry at problems in relationships with friends and family. Men, on the other hand, get angrier at strangers, things that don't work properly, and societal issues. But what is anger's purpose? What does it drive you to do? Well, anger erupts at the violation of an expectation or the blocking of a goal. So like fear, it helps keep you safe from a threat by masking how scared you are and preparing you for response. But unlike fear, anger also helps you become more productive. Anger is used to set boundaries, assert dominance, and move forward in complex situations. And what's more is it comes in 3 distinct flavors: aggressive, passive, and assertive. Aggressive anger involves bullying, selfishness, and vengeance, and links us most closely to our ancient ancestors and modern animals. These acts take the form of instantaneous responses and help us feel briefly better about a situation, but they rarely involve rational thought. So screaming, swearing, and hitting someone who cuts in line at the store is, in reality, not all that different from a dog barking at the postman because it's encroaching on their territory. Passive anger is the kind of thing you might exert when your roommate uses all your milk and you're forced to use eggnog for your cereal. I say forced. That was one damn fine bowl of Captain Crunch, I can tell ya. Examples of passive anger include evasiveness and manipulation. But while this type of anger does avoid confrontation, it can be dangerous, as the internalization of your feelings will make you attack others who are unrelated to the situation, and also cause you to suffer severe mental harm if done often enough over a long period of time. The final kind of anger is assertive, and this is considered to be the most acceptable form as it requires a measured, deliberate approach in response to unfair treatment of others. This is done through anger-driven decisions or actions performed in a non-threatening way. It still allows you to rid yourself of the sense of unfairness you'd carry around by being passive, but without going batshit crazy, like a rabid, postman-hating dog. These distinct categories are important because aggression and anger are not interchangeable terms. Anger is not inherently a bad trait. It can make you aggressive for sure, but an act of aggression doesn't always require anger to be present in the first place. And at number 2, and 1, happiness and sadness. We're bunching these two together because many of the factors which cause sadness are linked to an absence of those who cause happiness. When we do things to feel happy, we're also doing it in order to feel less sad. The whole thing is like one big scale, with abject despair on one side and pure bliss on the other. And the quest to reach the more pleasurable end of this scale takes on many forms. Whether it's putting things in our mouths, putting our things in other people's mouths, or some other way of achieving joy which I've yet to discover. But how is happiness generated? And what impact does it have on your decision-making? Well, for a start, it seems that how happy or sad you are is at least partially controlled by your genetics, with estimates suggesting as much as 50% of your general cheeriness is determined by your DNA. But surprisingly, only 10% of your happiness is affected by your life circumstances and living situation, with a whopping 40% of your personal pleasure entirely down to your perception, meaning that the secret to happiness could be nothing more than a change of mindset. And this is why talking therapies and counseling are sometimes prescribed before or alongside drugs when treating certain types of depression. Obviously, when sadness comes in a form as severe as depression, this is not something anyone would want to strive for. But on a lesser scale, sadness is an extremely necessary component of the human experience. Young children cry at the sadness they feel when they're separated from their parents because they need their presence in order to survive. The sadness felt when a couple breaks up is necessary, as it pushes you to repeatedly invest yourself into a relationship. And I guess without your sports team conceding that early goal, you'd never truly savor that last-minute winner. Sadness also helps you focus and become more attentive. And one experiment from 2007 showed that people who felt depressed before tackling complex math problems scored higher than happy people. So instead of boning up before your next pop quiz, just break up with your partner and strangle your hamster. But avoiding or using sadness is only half the story. In truth, the pursuit of happiness makes us crave many varied things. And according to psychologist Martin Seligman, the vast array of tasks and threats we humans derive happiness from can be compartmentalized using the acronym PERMA: pleasure, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. These are the 5 things we do because they make us happy. From tasty food and friendships through to conquering meaningful challenges, all can be placed within these 5 groups. Maslow's hierarchy of happiness offers a similar set of categories, placing life purpose at the top and basic biological needs at the bottom. But how can we accurately tell what makes us happiest? Can we measure the effects of desiring and acquiring these things scientifically in the brain? Indeed, we can! Each person's individual levels of serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins may be genetically set at birth, but later in life it's possible to acquire imbalances which are both beneficial and detrimental, and which can cause and be caused by a range of things. Dopamine helps boost cognitive function, allowing you to gain pleasure from completing a task, allowing us to become productive human beings. And while low levels of this chemical are associated with addictions, high levels are often found in those who routinely engage in creative pursuits. Serotonin comes along when you feel like you've done something important, therefore pushing us towards finding meaning in our actions, and its absence has been linked to a predilection towards criminal activity and depression. Oxytocin is released during orgasm and by mothers during childbirth and breastfeeding, and this chemical makes us desire intimacy. Intriguingly, oxytocin levels are also known to rise when you receive a gift. So if your mom tried hitting on Uncle Bill over Christmas, it's because she really liked her present. And finally, endorphins are used as a countermeasure by your body to boost happiness in the face of anxiety or pain, which is why runners get that second high, or sadomasochists enjoy being strapped down and whipped until bloody. Or so I've heard. And overall, it's important to know that these levels are hugely affected by the way we respond to the situations which cause them. How you react to a sad event determines the level of each chemical in your brain, and vice versa. It's a vicious cycle for sure, and one which humanity is currently struggling with. Today, more people than ever before suffer depression and anxiety. And it may be that without the harsh conditions of the past which gave our lives a purpose, our comfortable existence has exposed our inability to deal with a relatively trouble-free life. We've started lacking the ability to react appropriately to both good and bad things. We attribute our sadness or lack of happiness to the fact that we are too fat, too skinny, that your dog's dead, that Trump's in power, and that it's the 2000s and we still have no jetpack. But as we've just found out, events in life don't have as big an impact on your happiness compared to the major influence of how you perceive them. To illustrate this, we will end with reference to a study conducted by Northwestern University and the University of Massachusetts from 1978. This investigation focused on 2 groups of people and catastrophic accident victims. Some of these people had won millions, others were quadriplegics. Yet both reported relatively similar average happiness levels. Regardless of our situation, it seems humans have an innate ability to snap back to a base level of happiness even after catastrophically good or bad events. We get used to the routine of whatever hand life has dealt us. Whether that involves a lottery winner having a butler to wipe your ass, or a quadriplegic having a nurse do the same thing. We just get used to it. But if you want to change how you feel, you've got 2 options. Shake things up for a temporary fix, or for a permanent solution, change the way you think.